Well, welcome to week number 2, and our journey this week is going to be with Robert Greenleaf and a term he coined called servant leadership. Some of you may be familiar with Robert Greenleaf and servant leadership, others may not. But this week, what we'd like to do is take a deeper dive into what it means to be a servant leader, and I think important for us, and that is, what does servant leadership mean to ethics, and what does it mean to ethical leadership? A little bit about Robert Greenleaf. He was born in 1904 in Terre Haute, Indiana. Worked for about 38 years for a company called AT&T, and then in the 1960s retired. But rather than sit on the porch and kind of watch life go by, he wanted to stay involved, and he did. He saw what was going on around him, did some reading, and determined that the leadership that was going on at this particular time, again in the mid to late 60s, was not the type of leadership that was going to be required as we move towards the future. And if you can imagine, in the 1960s, what was that kind of image of leadership for yourself? And Bob Greenleaf took a look at that image, some would say that archetype of leadership, and said that is not the model that we need. And basically sat down, began writing, and wrote his first essay. Many consider it to be a seminal essay, and that is called The Servant as Leader, which is going to be the first chapter in the book that you will read of a number of his essays for this week. But that is really his seminal work, where he opens up much more around his understanding of what servant leadership is and what servant leadership can be about. One of the challenges that Bob Greenleaf gives us, and that is that Bob Greenleaf was much more the philosopher rather than one to be a methodologist. That is, Bob Greenleaf gives us, I think, a very good philosophical foundation for servant leadership, but not the methodology. So the picture he paints, and you'll see this as you begin to dive into his writings, can be a bit fuzzy and can kind of meander for a bit. But that's Bob Greenleaf, and he's one of those who would suggest that go where the energy is taking you, and you see that in his writings too as well. So what people have struggled with is how do you take this philosophy and make some methodology of it? And today, many organizational development leaders, those who talk on leadership, those who speak to leadership, refer back to Robert Greenleaf as a foundational point for them in their own understanding of leadership, and then have continued to speak and write about servant leadership in terms of how one can create servant leaders and servant leader organizations. You're also going to be invited to spend some time with an article by Larry Spears, the former CEO of the Greenleaf Center, where he distills and takes a look at Bob Greenleaf and his writing on servant leadership, and really comes up with 10 critical characteristics of what it means to be a servant leader, and how does one go about being a servant leader by implementing these characteristics. So he really kind of helps paint the picture, kind of getting that fuzzy picture, that abstract picture, if you will, of what Bob Greenleaf paints, and kind of solidifies it more with the characteristics. So I'm going to invite you to spend some time with the characteristics. How do they speak to you, and maybe how are you operationalizing these characteristics? Also, there's an opportunity for you in the lecture notes here to go and see some questions that may help you as you're kind of going through the 10 characteristics. Today, Bob Greenleaf and his work continues to be discussed. Bob Greenleaf died in 1990. And the Bob Greenleaf Center on Servant Leadership is down in Indianapolis, holds an annual conference every year. And a number of organizations, both for-profit and non-for-profit, have tried in some way to implement servant leadership, both at the leadership development level as well as the organizational cultural level, where they have tried to become more servant leader organizations. Matter of fact, Fortune magazine puts out the 100 best companies to work for every year, and over the last 15 or so years, and increasingly so, more organizations are on that list who do practice or try to practice servant leadership and become servant leadership leader organizations. So I'm going to invite you this week to spend some time with Bob and his writings, taking a look at servant leadership, and see how they speak to you, see what they say to you around your own leadership journey. And also, I think importantly, pay attention to, first of all, our primary question, our research question, is what makes for an ethical leader. Bring also into the conversation, how does servant leadership inform this question, this research question of what makes for an ethical leader. So have a good read this week, and see you later in the week in the discussion area. Thanks.